Right, so today I wanted to make a video about the Laffer curve, and it's basically explaining why just because you increase taxes, it doesn't mean you increase revenue, and obviously vice versa. And the one thing that I would point out too, for starters, too, is that this is a widely accepted economic fact, even amongst the Keynesians. So anyone trying to debate is, I think, kind of an idiot. But anyway, let's get into it. They say the idea that higher revenues can be raised by lowering tax rates seems counterintuitive to many. In fact, politicians who campaign on lowering taxes are often derided as liars, especially in light of budget deficits. It's often asked, how can anyone promise to cut taxes when the government is already short on revenue? The fact is that once taxation reaches a certain point, it actually deters market activity and encourages tax evasion. In those cases, lowering taxes increases the total amount of revenue being collected. This can be proven when we look at the relationship between taxes and revenue. In economics, the examination of this relationship is known as the Laffer curve. It's named after the economist Arthur Laffer. Um, Okay, saying when examining the Laffer curve, we see that at low rates of taxation, the amount of revenue increases proportionately as expected. But if we consider a 100% tax rate, one in which the government took everything workers and businesses earned, the result would be near zero in revenues without any incentive to work. Absent forced slavery, no one would work, at least not on the books. Black market activity would certainly thrive, but in the end, the government would be collecting next to nothing in revenue. So if we have zero revenues at a 100% rate, we can prove that somewhere in between 1 and 100 percent the line of the graph curves. The curve is the point where market activity is being deterred by excessive taxation. If the taxes are lowered to below the curve, revenue will increase in market activity as market activity increases. Laffer and his curve became well known during the Reagan administration, when lower taxes on America's wealthiest earners actually resulted in more total revenue being collected from that tax bracket. It's important to remember that deficits are wholly government creation, and feeding more money to the endless pit, which is big government, will never fully appease the beast. When a budget deficit exists, government spending needs to be addressed and trimmed of excess first and foremost. But when there still exists a need for more revenue, further draining the tax base is not the answer. Instead, empowering the private sector to earn more drives increased market activity and brings in more revenues in the process. Economists of all persuasions do not dispute the relationship between tax rates and revenues demonstrated by the Laffer curve. They merely disagree over where the curve occurs. But when politicians claim that such a relationship doesn't exist, they're either demonstrating ignorance or being blatantly dishonest. So again, the debate here is not whether or not it exists, it's where it is. And the first thing that people bring up too is the concept of trickle down economics. Well, the funny thing about trickle down economics is that it's almost entirely a idea that the left and the progressives bring up to quote unquote debunk the not wanting to tax the you know what out of people, in that no one who actually supports a more free market system has ever actually used the term trickle down economics. It's entirely something the left brings up. It's like, calling someone a racist or a conspiracy theorist. It's that they don't actually have to debate people. Um, but again, this is the point too, that whenever they make that argument, they're wrong off the start, because most progressives, at least the ones that I've came across and I see, they would dispute this, right? In that, people like Bernie Sanders have said like 80, 90% marginal tax rates is not unreasonable, right? So this is the problem when it comes to these people, is that they really have no idea what they're talking about. Because again, it's just a basic aspect of human psychology too, that um, if you put work into something, the less you're going to get out of it, the less likely you are to be able to want to do something in the first place, right? And another important aspect of this too is that as you lower people's taxes, donations to charities goes up pretty much proportionally, right? So this is another thing that the left gets completely wrong, is that they think that if you lower taxes, then people are just going to hoard the money, right? And one of the other big reasons why, or the biggest reason why lowering taxes often leads to an increase in revenue, is that if you don't tax people, again, this is, you'd think this would be a basic, such, so easy to understand, it's not even funny, but there's so many people that don't understand this, you have to explain it. In that, if you lower people's taxes, right, they're going to spend that money in some way, shape, or form. The only way that you would not want to lower people's taxes, assuming that they're very high. I mean, I don't think that, I think that they should be much lower no matter what, if not even existent at all. I don't even think, but they definitely should be a lot less than they are. If you lower people's taxes, they're going to spend that money. So again, if you lower someone's taxes, the only argument that you could feasibly make to why you should keep those taxes high is that if you don't keep these taxes high, then people are just gonna keep that money and they're gonna, hide it under their bed or something like that. But that doesn't make any sense, because the way you know even if you believe the government's 2% inflation, okay, well, if you're hiding money under your bed, then you're losing money, right? So there is no scenario to where lowering taxes isn't a better idea, right? There's no scenario. Because again, if you lower people's taxes, what are they going to do? They're going to spend that money, right? They're going to eat out more. They're going to go on another holiday. They're going to invest that money, right? They're going to, hell, maybe they keep it in the bank and the bank can loan it out to other people, right? So this is why when you lower people's taxes, you don't lose revenue, because again, if people spend that money, okay, well, they're still paying sales taxes. The businesses that they're spending it at are going to be making more money, which means they'll be paying more taxes. Maybe they invest that money, meaning again, businesses have more money to work with, so they can expand more. They can hire more people, which means more people are going to be paying taxes again. Like I said, there's so many aspects of it to it's not even funny. So um, and again, like I said, that this is where the progressives and the leftists go completely wrong, and that they genuinely think that if you don't have really high taxes, then you're going to have these rich people that are just going to hoard money. But that's not how it works, right? That's not how reality works, too. And the other way, progressives are wrong too, is that they don't just want to raise taxes on the quote unquote rich. No, like what a lot of these people define as rich is like anybody making more than like $100,000 a year. But again, and someone living in Toronto or Vancouver or San Francisco, $100,000 is middle class, if that, right? You're probably lower middle class in a lot of these places, right? So this is the other problem too, that this one size fits all solution is not a solution, right? Because the cost of living in a lot of these big cities is double, triple what it is in, a smaller city or a smaller town, right? So that's another problem with these one size fits all solutions. Now, again, I'm not saying we should have different tax rates for different people depending upon where they live. I'm simply saying, look, everybody should have lower taxes, right? Because if everybody wants to live in the city, again, there has to be a point to where it becomes too expensive and people just don't want to live in the city, right? That's another basic, supply and demand economics right there, right? So again, this is a very important thing for people to understand. And again, like I said, most people just don't understand it. And the very important aspect of this too is that this is something that, all economists agree on. Again, they just don't agree on exactly where it is, right? They don't agree on exactly where it is. And that is a big problem, right? And it would be really nice if we could actually get some real world examples of this. The other problem is that the government can manipulate these numbers so much that it's kind of, I guess it would be kind of hard for that to happen, right? Not to mention, too, you have years like 2020 to where so many people were out of work. It would be hard to do, I guess. But at the end of the day, it would be really nice to see, right? It would be really nice to see. But again, the problem is that whenever a politician calls to cut taxes, they're viewed as, oh, all you care about is the rich people, right? But the reality is that's not true, right there. And this is the problem too, that most people's political worldview, it's entirely just a projection of their own worldview, right? Most people's political opinions and worldview is entirely just a projection of their own political worldview, right? So when they hear a politician saying, I want to cut taxes, and they say, oh, it's only because you care about the rich people. Well, what they're saying is that I'm voting for whoever I'm voting for solely because they want to take money from other people and give it to me, right? That when you put it that way, all of a sudden it sounds a little different, right? So again, it's very funny to hear that, right? And not to mention too, this is the other problem when it comes to the progressive and the leftist types, is that they support these wealth redistributionist programs, not because they care about the poor, but because they want to take from the rich, right? And the reason why you know that is that if the socialists, I mean, there's many reasons I could go on forever for it, but I think one of the big ones is, if the socialists actually believed what they believe, then why have you never heard any socialists saying, hey, all the socialists of Canada or the US, we should all get together, form our own area, and we can have socialism, right? Why have they never done that? Well, they've never done that. Number one, because I think they're usually lazy people. Number one, they want other people to solve their problems, and number two, they're more motivated by wanting to take from the rich than they are wanting to give to the poor, right? Because if they were more motivated by wanting to help the poor than they were motivated by wanting to take from the rich, then they would be doing something like that, or at the very least they would be talking about it, right? I'm not necessarily saying they have to do it. I'm simply saying they never even talk about it, right? So again, that's, and not to mention too, you look at the areas that try these mass wealth redistributionist schemes, they don't work. All they do is just hollow out the middle class, and that you still have the rich. Like look at the big socialist countries. Like, is there not, it's still rich people? Like, of course there is, right? So again, like these people, like either they don't understand history at all, they don't understand reality at all, or they're just selfish beings, right? And when you're saying that, again, not to mention too, that's, it's natural, humans, they want to maximize their own output, right? That's true. But the problem too is that if you want to maximize society's output as a whole, you can't create massive incentives for large percentages of people to be entirely dependent upon very small groups of people. That's a terrible way of doing things in the long run, because the you're really teetering on the edge right there, right? Because if you have 1 million people dependent upon the incomes of 1,000 people, you're really stretching things thin there, right? Because the slightest little problem, and you have 1 million people that are now going to go hungry, right? So the reality of the situation, it should be, how can we increase everybody's incomes? How can we increase everybody's well-beings? And this is the reason why things are so stagnant in societies, that if you want to lift up the poor, you pretty much have to lift up the rich as well. Because if you want to lift up the poor, well, what do you need? You need them in better paying jobs, right? If you want them in better, someone has to be their boss, right? Someone has to be their boss, right? If you want to have everybody have a nicer place to live, or a place to live, well, somebody has to own those places. Now, the leftists would say, well, the government can just own it. Well, okay, well, then you have massively rich people in government, right? Like, again, like just basic reality for a lot of these people. It's like in one ear, out the other with the other one. They just don't understand, right? But again, at the end of the day, this is a very important thing to understand, that it should, you'd think it would be just basic human psychology, that people, like, this is the worst part about it too, because the people that don't understand this, they've literally never once in their life thought to themselves, okay, if I was in this person's position, how would I feel? If I was someone making $10 million a year, and I had someone saying, yeah, I want to tax 90% of that away, would I be more or less likely to want to continue earning that income, as opposed to someone saying, I only want to take 50, or I only want to take 20, or I only want to take 10. And of course, the more that the government wants to take from you, the less likely you are to be able to produce that, right? Like, and this is the worst thing about it too, with, like I said, is with these people, is that they've clearly never spent 5 seconds thinking to themselves, could I be wrong on this issue? And that is, I think, one of the biggest problems in society, is that when it comes to most people's worldview on whatever topic you want to bring up, they've never thought to themselves from the other side's perspective, right? They've never done that. Why, right? Why? I think it's very simple that the amount of propaganda that's out there um, prevents people from doing it, right? From the mainstream media, from public schools, from social media, all that stuff, right? So anyway, that's what I wanted to bring up today. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out those links below. Follow me on these other platforms if you haven't already. If you want to donate, you could do that as well. I would very much appreciate whatever support I can get. But like I said, at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe and stay tuned for more.